I didn't know that it is repeated session and all those things. Suddenly he said it will be over. Uh, uh,
I think that when you signed up, we were limited how much time, and we ran out of time. So, and I haven't got all day, Malik. You're trying to ask me what life was like when I was growing up. Is that what you're asking me? You were asking me about
yeah.
the Negro population, the blacks.
Negro population, there was a lot of segregation and they were not allowed to hotels. Blacks
Okay.
and dogs are not allowed, something like that. This,
Well, the blacks who moved north could get good jobs in the factories. So the blacks who left the South and moved to the North worked in factories. They were paid the same wages as the white workers, um, and they could become middle-class people. Um, in the South was severely damaged by the so-called Civil War.
that was long back.
But it wasn't all that long ago because it after the war, the North imposed what they call Reconstruction. And this was a period for 10 or 15 years in which um, Northern people came down and stole everything. They stole the property of the whites, and as a result, everybody was poor, and there was nobody to employ blacks or whites. It was just a poor. I remember growing up as a child. There were huge sections in the southern part, the southeast of the United States. They were just poor. There was nothing. Land wasn't worth anything. Um, and overall, people in the South were a lot poorer. It took a long time uh, for that to go away, and World War II had a lot to do with bringing industry and economic activity back to the South, making it come alive economically again. So the conditions there were just generally bad uh, until really uh, the mid 1950s. So uh, this had a big impact on everyone, and certainly on blacks. But the ones who went north went to work in the factories. Well, the segregation in the South, the school segregation, was primarily because schools were segregated by economic class, depending on your neighborhood, because the schools were neighborhood based. They were not race based schools.
Were there any Negroes in your class?
They were not race-based schools. They were
Okay. When you studied,
economic, they were economic
no, no,
class-based schools.
I know it, but when you
Yeah.
studied in schools,
Yeah.
were there any black people there, black students?
They were from abroad. We had black students from abroad, not from America.
Achha.
Um, I think I think one of the ways, I don't know for sure. These things weren't really discussed, but I think one of the reasons that segregation got uh, going was, let's look at public transportation, a bus. public transportation. In those days, everyone used it. Uh, Everybody didn't have a car or two cars or three cars. Um, Also, in those days, there were any shopping centers. The stores were big department stores downtown in the heart of the city. So if the women were going to go shopping for clothes or cosmetics or shoes or whatever, they would get on the bus and ride downtown and shop, and then they would ride the bus home. Well, the buses had all kinds of different passengers. The black workforce used the buses, and the black men had um, heavy manual work jobs. They worked uh, in the fields. They worked digging ditches to lay water pipes or sewer pipes. They worked hard, so they perspired. They would be dirty. The clothes would be dirty from the soil and the work conditions, or they were built. They were in construction, uh, but they were working with hands in environments where you easily get dirty. So they would go on the same bus. Well, they sit on a seat and the seat gets dirty. And in those days, the women would not go outside to a store unless they were well dressed. It's not like today. So I can remember the women, they would have on nice dresses, nice suits, stockings on their legs, high heel shoes, white gloves, hats with a veil. If they sat on a dirty seat, they ruined the dress. And so it was a social convention that the seating was separate. There wasn't any line drawn on the bus where black people couldn't go past it. It was nothing like that. Sometimes you'd get on a bus, the whole bus would be full of black people. So, but if there were mixed populations, the blacks would be on one part and the whites the other. And this led to the slogan, the back of the bus. Well, the blacks could have been in the front of the bus, and in the back. There would have been segregated seating. But I think it was for the reason I gave. It was just a social convention, a form of politeness. Uh, Otherwise, the bus company would need to hire somebody to wipe down the seats all the time. They'd be running around cleaning the seats, or so I think that's the reason for the separate seating on the buses. It was just different kinds of people were using the buses. And some had dirty clothes and some had very nice, fine clothes because they were doing different things. Now, they also say, well, there were different water fountains. The blacks had their own water fountains, the whites had their own. For some reason, this was always meant that you were segregating the blacks. You could just as well say you were segregating the whites. The reason for this, I think, I don't know, because these things were not really discussed. But in those days, when this originated, infectious diseases were a serious concern. This began before their antibiotics. who is most likely to have an infectious disease? A poor person. So it was a form of controlling the spread of infectious diseases. They also had a law. You could not spit into the streets. You couldn't. Why? Because of tuberculosis. There was no cure for tuberculosis. And spitting in the streets was a way of spreading it. So it was against the law. Well, this was not a law directed against Black people. It was just a law to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. And I think that's the reason for the separate water fountains. I don't know, but I think it is because in my home, the Black woman that helped my mother, she ate meals at the table with us. She drank out of the same glasses we used. She ate with the same plates out of the same bowls, and nobody thought anything about it. So, and if my mother wasn't there, she had the authority over us. And you had to be just as polite to her as you did to your mother.
You're the Black woman?
Yes, she was a Black woman.
Mhm.
Many, you see, in those days, being a housewife was a hard job because they didn't have all of these machines,
Yeah.
washing machines, drying machines, dishwashing machines, vacuum cleaners. Cleaning was I can remember my mother on her knees in the bathroom with the bathtub, washing clothes on a scrub board. And Carrie, who was our household help, she was a Black woman. She and mother would both be on their knees. They would fill the bathtub with water, put the clothes in, and they had what was called a scrub board. And they would rub the clothes on this board. And so if you had 2 or 3 children, or 3 or 4, as families had in those days, there were a lot of clothes to wash, and sheets, bed sheets, and towels. It was a big job. Today, you just throw it in a machine, you go off, you come back and put in another machine and go off. Well, see, so almost any white household had Blacks helping them. And essentially, they were part of the family. These would be long-term relationships.
So you should have liked this novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, very much.
We have what?
Uncle Tom's Cabin novel. Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Uncle Tom was a propaganda piece to justify a war that was about tariffs. The Civil War was not about slavery. It was about the North imposing tariffs on the South to pay for Northern manufacturing. And the South said, we're not paying for you at our expense. You're richer than we are. And that was the reason for the war. Well, Uncle Tom's Cabin was sponsored by the war industry to cause a war. It's a lie. You don't go, the reason they're slaves was that when the English colonists came to America, there was plenty of land, plenty of resources, and no workforce. There was no one to hire because the land was there. Everybody wanted to be a landowner.
But slavery was there at that time.
Yeah.
Slavery, Negro slavery was there.
So slaves were brought in as a workforce.
That's
It wasn't the white people who enslaved them. They were enslaved by the black kings in Africa who conducted slave wars.
maybe, but these people continue.
Dahomey, the king of Dahomey, was the black king of Dahomey, and his armies were the source of slaves. They conquered people and sold the slaves, first to the Arabs, and then later to the British, the Spanish, the Portuguese, who brought them to North and South America.
But that does not change the fact, no? Whether
But
you slave or you buy a slave,
yeah, but you see,
his
if
status
you
is
buy a
same.
if you buy a slave, you've made an investment. You don't want to mistreat your own investment. If you it was very expensive to buy slaves. If you mistreat them, you're going to get a bad work performance. They're not going to be good workers. It made no sense that people were whipping and beating and killing their slaves. If you bought a factory, would you go in and take a hammer and start beating the machinery? No. All of this was propaganda. Of course, there are always injustices everywhere. And of course, there were injustices, but it wasn't just blacks who suffered them. And the notion that you brought people over so that you could hate them and mistreat them made no sense. Why would
But
you do
in
that?
your times, there was some extremist movements,
There were some
etc. movements were there.
there were some of those. It was very limited.
Hmm.
It wasn't a big movement. Uh, I think most black people just wanted to get along, and I think that's true today. They have radicalized some of the blacks, but most of them, the ones I see where I live, are like everybody else. They work. You can trust them. They're not into crime. They don't do drugs. Um, and I live in a small town, and that's different from a big city. The black families here are intact. The children know who their father is. Um, there's really no difference. Um,
Were you
people get
imprisoned at any
along,
time?
huh?
Were you imprisoned, sent to prison at any time yourself?
I didn't hear you, Malik. You
Were you
speak
sent to prison, prison? Were you imprisoned at any time?
speak slower, please.
Were you in prison, prison, prison,
What is the word?
prison, prison, jail, jail, jail. prison.
I don't understand. What do you ask? I don't understand the word, Malik.
Were you jailed at any time for any offense? Means any agitation, student agitation. Many drafters were sent to jails, isn't
Well,
it?
look, today all the schools are integrated. Um, even when I was a child, there were universities for blacks. For example, Atlanta, Georgia, uh, they had Atlanta University. It was a collection of black colleges. Early on, colleges and universities were established for blacks. Um, I don't know why the universities weren't integrated. It may have been that they thought there was too much difference in the whites and blacks preparation, uh, because, the universities, the white people, some were poor, some were middle class, some were rich. And of course, the rich would have more advantages, and then the middle class, and then the poor class. Well, the blacks were mainly poor. So to throw them in this population that's better prepared, that has uh, a similar behavioral patterns and cultural responses, may have just seemed it wouldn't work.
Now, what I am asking is,
But there were black doctors. When I was a child, there were black medical doctors. There were black lawyers. So they had gone to universities. They had educations. In Atlanta, Georgia, when I was growing up, there were black millionaires. There were people in real estate. Um, you can say they didn't have as many opportunities then as they do now. White people then had more opportunities than they do now.
that's there. What I am asking is, in
But
the anti-Vietnam War,
yeah,
anti-Vietnam War movement, people will not go for drafting, not notice, no draft movement. Many were jailed. Many
I
were
think
sent to prison.
I think Americans enjoy having non-white ethnicities around. It adds color and interest to life. What they don't like is to have their country intentionally overrun by millions and millions of immigrants who come in illegally.
No
They
country
don't
tolerance.
they because that then confuses what does it mean to be a citizen. How am I different from the man who just walked across the border? I'm treated the same way. He gets all the benefits and he's not a citizen. So I think this is what people oppose to. It's not they're being racist. They're just saying, hey, look, it's our country. If anybody can walk into it, it's not our country. It's not a country at all. So what I'm trying to say is that racism became a weapon to be used by various interest groups against the society. So if you're left wing and you want to overthrow things, racism is a weapon.
What do you mean by this deep state? Deep state.
Deep state is the institutionalized ruling elite. Who are they? It's the military security complex. So that's not just the CIA and the NSA. It's also all the private corporations that make weapons, ammunition, airplanes. It's a combination of public government offices and private profit-making companies. Okay, that's one component of the deep state. Another component is the organized business lobbies. For example, the pharmaceutical lobby. They're very powerful. They have many representatives in Washington. These representatives make campaign contributions to the senators and the representatives. They make those contributions as a way of controlling the senator and the representative. because the senator and representative then has to vote for the laws the pharmaceutical companies want. Otherwise, they don't get the campaign contribution. The campaign contribution goes to their opponent in the next election and they lose office. So the lobby groups can control the legislators by how they direct campaign contributions. So that's an element of the deep state. You see, all of the business lobbies have this power, not just the armaments and the pharmaceuticals, but agribusiness, energy, mining,
No, I am asking a question.
communication,
No,
all of
I am asking a question.
yeah,
If you are
and
a very good person, if you are a very good
that
person,
that become that becomes the deep state.
no,
They don't get defeated in an election. They're still there. The election happens, the politicians change, but the deep state is still there.
no, what I
So
mean to say is,
yeah,
suppose
that's
you
what
are a very good person
yeah,
of a saintly character, like a saint.
yeah.
People
So
can vote for you even without any money. You may
do they
not spend
what?
any, you are a very good person in the locality, very good person in the locality.
Yeah.
You are like a saint. Suppose you are a person, you are a very good person, helping all
Mhm.
others, helping other people. You help other people.
Yes.
You are a very good person. You have a very good name in the locality. So people can vote for you even without any money.
Well, suppose you're Robert F. Kennedy Jr.,
Yeah.
okay? He's a very good person. He's trying to improve the uh, quality of medicines and vaccines so that they do less damage to people. And he is going to have a very difficult time being confirmed in office because the pharmaceutical companies see him as an enemy. And so they're going to go to all the senators and they'll tell every senator, if you vote to confirm him in his office, you don't get any more campaign contributions. So they can block him. And so it doesn't matter how good he is or how much he's trying to help people. The pharmaceutical industry can block him by using their money.
But
So
he is in one constituency, no? Suppose
what?
you are in Atlanta. You are in Atlanta.
I'm not. I grew up there.
No, you were born in Atlanta or
I grew
studied in
up.
Atlanta. Atlanta,
Atlanta
Atlanta,
is,
Georgia, Atlanta. You said once this thing, right? You said Atlanta, I studied or I was born. Atlanta. Where were you born?
yes, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia.
Ah,
Yes.
Atlanta. That's what I am saying.
I was born there, but I don't live there
No,
now.
no, what I am saying is
Yeah.
you have so much reputation in Atlanta.
Yes.
You are a very good person, people think.
All right.
And the election is limited to Atlanta, no? Suppose a Senate or representative election in Atlanta is limited to that city. People vote
Yeah.
only in that city. Others cannot
Yeah.
come to Atlanta and vote. Can they come? No. Voters list. Now I am saying, suppose people like you so much and you are of a so good a character, you can win without money also.
Well,
No,
if
no, no, let us leave
if
it.
people like a politician,
Mm.
um, they can. vote for him. But for the politician to have enough money to campaign and to encourage the votes, he has to have campaign contributions, and these come mainly from the deep state. So the politician has to please the deep state most of the time. Maybe not all of the time, but most of the time. And so this is the way the deep state controls. Also, if you're in a political campaign, the deep state, if they're opposed to you, will spend a lot of money for your opponent making false charges against you. And the media will publish the false charges, and then the people will say, well, maybe he's not very good after all. And this is the way American politics works. If you notice in an American political campaign, very seldom do they discuss a real issue. It's usually some sort of accusation, an accusation. They try to slander one another. And so what the public hears is not what is his position on the issue, but they'll hear, oh, he abuses women, or he takes drugs, or he has ethical violations, or they make up charges. And so a political campaign, they're throwing charges at one another. If you look at Trump and Kamala Harris, all right, she says he's a fascist. Kamala says Trump is a fascist. Trump says she's stupid. Well, what issue is being discussed? Should we stop the war? Should we take a careful look at the vaccines? No, they don't discuss that. He's a fascist. She's stupid. This is what politics is today. You very seldom hear anybody discussing how we're going to deal with a serious situation. How are we going to deal with the debt? How are we going to deal with the Israelis and all this trouble in the Middle East? Can we just always support Israel? If we do, how can we stop the troubles? We got to sometimes act against them if we want to make this get resolved. How can we solve the war in Ukraine if we don't even speak to Putin? These things don't get discussed. If you speak to Putin, it means you're a Russian agent. You see, already the Democrats are attacking Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard. These are two Trump appointees as Russian agents. Why? Because they talk to Russians. Well, if you can't talk to Russians, how do you resolve a problem? So you see, the politics makes no sense. You actually can't conduct diplomacy. Remember, in Trump's first term, they removed General Flynn as his national security advisor. Why? Because he talked to the Russians. Well, how can he be a national security advisor if he can't talk to the Russians? Well, he got removed. They wanted to put him in prison for talking to Russians. Well, this level of politics is nonsensical. And now we have the Senate Majority Leader, Charles Schumer, the Democrat. He won't be the majority leader long, but he still is. And he's trying to get a law passed that it's a crime to protest against what Israel is doing in Gaza and Lebanon. So if you go out and protest it, you've committed a crime. So this is against the Constitution. It's against the First Amendment. Well, they don't even care about the Constitution. They'd rather protect Israel.
Were you opposed to wars in
You're
Middle
gonna,
East from the
if
beginning?
you're gonna, if you all you're going to do is protect Israel, how are you going to solve the problem? You can't. Instead, they don't solve problems. They call names, fascist, Nazi, stupid. This is not real politics. So it didn't used to be this way, but this is the way it is now. And it makes it easy for the deep state. So I don't know what else you want to know, Malik. Here's what's really happened. Um, the way liberals have always pursued reforms, any kind of reform, is through denunciation. They denounce, they denounce, they denounce. Well, decade after decade after decade of denouncing the system has eroded the structure of belief that it rests on. And so it's collapsing. The structure of belief is collapsing. We now have the Democrat leader in the Senate, and he doesn't believe in the First Amendment. Well, what is he there for? If you don't believe in the First Amendment, there can't be debate. If there can't be debate, there can't be democracy. And yet he wants to slap down the First Amendment. It's more important to protect Israel than to have free speech. Well, this is a complete collapse in the belief system. This is what's happened to America. And they've rewritten history to substitute a fake belief system for the real one. And then they teach the fake belief system to the kids in the school. So the population, as it changes through time, no longer is connected to the belief system that the country rests on. Well, this is what the real problem is in America. And it's what I've watched develop over my lifetime. This is the real problem, not racism or any of the other things. It's the real problem. They are destroying the structure of belief that is the foundation for the United States. The United States is the Constitution. If you overthrow the Constitution, you overthrow the United States. And that's what's happening. That's what the Democrats have been doing. Overthrowing the Constitution, substituting privilege for merit, substituting censorship for free speech. You're going in the opposite direction of liberty, democracy. You're going into tyranny. If you don't have free speech, you have tyranny. If you don't have free speech, you can't have truth. So that's the real situation. And it's the situation I've watched.